Starlight's bedroom reeked with incense. She had been burning the stuff nonstop for days. She actually found the smell repugnant, but she thought it was essential to the atmosphere. She could truly recall herself a witch if she didn't master the tone. She knew witch was an outdated term, bordering the offensive to actual realized unicorns in the prime of their powers, but it suited her. It suited Starlight so well that those pigtails she had chosen to keep well in her teenage years, or black eyeshadow, which it didn't sound right. The word pronounced in Starlight's ears as she dumped the ashes into the middle of the circle. Some ponies may have called her twisted for using the remains of a dead bird for her ritual. Whatever sleepy beak had died of natural causes, and he would probably be thrilled to know that he was still Starlight's most trusted ally, even if he no longer perched on her windowsill and eat birdseed from her hoof, which Starlight could hear her classmates chanting it. They thought they were twisting a knife in her side, making her squirm, but nobody knew who she was. At least those who stuck and tired one-word insults. Did any of them know the kind of fear, reverence, even the word witch had once demanded in polite society? No, they didn't. They didn't understand anything outside of their own limited world views. While their classmates were out enjoying the luxury of underage drinking, she was placing chicken bones around her hoof-drawn circle of red ink. The circle was pretty simple in design. Those who dabbled in the moral schools of magic would recognize it as a classmate's materialization circle, but some variations of Starlight's own design, the runes surrounding the inner rim, were copied directly from the Tome of Temptation. It wasn't the original book. The original was probably locked up in some private section of the library in the Crystal Empire, but a slightly abridged copy was significant for one ritual. "Blood of the sinner," said Starlight out loud. She picked up a knife from her dresser. This was no cheap imitation. This was an actual ceremonial blade that she snagged for less than 5 bits from a clueless pony sale. Starlight adorned it, holding it in her magic. She made her feel that she pierced the barrier that separated her from the witches of old. She was a professional now. Starlight smiled. She pressed the blade against her hoof, hard enough to draw out a few droplets of blood. The word was practically a slur to some those uppity big city unicorns who read books filled with spells. They were too cowardly to perform, but Starlight didn't believe in knowledge over practice. How could any pony learn magic if more than half of it was forbidden? The droplets fell neatly into Starlight's goblet of wine. Her father guarded this vintage booze like it was a pirate treasure, but it was ridiculous paranoia had done him no good to the end. She didn't even need a lock-picking spell. All it took was a crossing another previously unknown avenue of magic, a combination of teleportation and a basic object of displacement spell to get what she wanted. She knelt down on all fours in front of the circle. It made her a little giddy to imagine all of the ponies who hyped up on magic, and Moonlight had attempted exactly what she was doing. But they had all been amateurs, her inexperience with reaching for something inside themselves. Starlight already knew what lived inside of her. She had been cultivating it for years, familiarizing herself with its texture and habits. Sometimes it was a feeling, other times it was a roaring wave of sound, but it was always there. Starlight tilted her head back and drank deeply from the goblet. She could taste the bitterness of her own blood mixed tentatively with the wine. Most ponies would have recoiled at the taste. Starlight almost did, but she reminded herself that it was nothing compared to what came next. She held the almost empty goblet above the circle. Starlight crossed her eyes, reaching deep inside herself to prod at the current magical energy. Sometimes it felt like a current. Other times it was more like a ball sitting inside of her stomach. It buzzed and sparked, sending tremors across Starlight's fur as she drew from it. As the incantation flowed easily from her mouth, Starlight poured the remaining wine into the center of the circle. She could feel her magic pulsing like a heartbeat. Starlight knew that the other unicorns didn't feel this way. She was special. She was chosen. Midnight announced itself in the deep below of the grandfather clock. The last word was swept from Starlight's mouth as the word sound pounded against the walls. As those 12 gongs rang out, she felt like she was listening to the house's heartbeat. The slow fade into the last gong, lingering as silence fell upon the house. Starlight could hear its own ghost long after it was gone. In the complete silence, she found herself wrapped up in a surreal hyper-awareness. She could hear her mane growing. She could feel the blood in her veins, pumping steadily into her beating heart. Her heart itself was beginning to throb in her ears, which each heartbeat to clap like a thunder. Accelerating was the word. Starlight felt like she was high. "I call it the shadows to me," she whispered. She could hear the chicken bones rattling. Something was pressing against the wall, and little hoof purging the thin barrier like a curious foal, incorporeal creatures of indeterminate stature and sex. Little more than a gust of wind on the other side. Starlight could feel it reaching inside her head. "I call the shadows to me," she repeated. Starlight's world spun in unseen axes. She could feel dozens of things that she didn't know exist. Warnings, snippets of thoughts, and feelings imploring her to turn back. But she pressed on, pushing them aside as if they were blocking the concession stand at a local fair. Starlight ignored the projected agony of doomed souls, their wails increasing in volume as she easily swatted them aside. She could feel 100 of creatures pressing their heavy bodies together, trying to escape through the tunnel that she had created. "I call the shadows to me." The loud noises and sensations slowly faded. The warnings, once overwhelming, became little more than a continuous buzz of unease, even though it was soon swept away, leaving behind only the faded memory of what had once engaged all of Starlight's senses. But she wasn't alone. The chicken bones continued to rattle, a fitting soundtrack to the bittery cold air that seemed to be creeping into her bedroom. A frost that reminded Starlight of the frozen north was seeping out from the center of the circle. She could feel the cold air brushing her muzzle, but she still didn't move. She could hear a voice chanting. It sounded very much like her own, except slightly deeper. It spoke in a language long deceased, straining against some of the more ingratitude sables, clearly not designed for an equine mouth. Starlight listened to this voice for several minutes. It was speaking too rapidly for her to translate, even if the sentences began to loop. When everything came to an abrupt stop, an unnatural silence descended as each and every noise was snuffled out by an unseen hoof. Starlight hadn't moved an inch, but she felt as if she entered a box. The world around her had shrunk. The name came up rumbling out of nowhere under Starlight's feet. She didn't hear it as much as she felt a series of tremors rattling through her brain. A shiver tried to race through her spine, but she suppressed it. Starlight shifted the position of her hooves slightly, letting the name settle as the quake passed. She could still feel it in her bones. "No," she said. The second quake, much stronger than the first. She could feel her hooves shaking. It came as a series of interlocked tremors, rushing through her body in a rapid succession. Laughter. The creature was laughing, the force of its mirth shaking the entire body. "No," said Starlight. She spoke firmly this time. Playtime was over. Starlight had no intention of wasting her powers on such frivolous pursuits. She was there for the one pony and one pony alone, King Sombra. She had studied star charts combined through the ancient spellbooks and learned a variety of dead languages, all for him. The pony she admired more than any pony else, gone but not forgotten by Starlight. Starlight's body shook as another quake of laughter burst from below, but she ignored it. Starlight reached past the presence as she began to settle itself. She opened the tear a bit wider, groping for what she wanted. She could feel it. It was just out of its reach, in its form shifting and thriving as it struggled to access the breach Starlight had created. Parts of it had begun to drizzle pathetically from the meager opening from the ink of a bottle, but it still wasn't enough. Abruptly, the once tiny opening opened like a gaping wound. A massive pair of claws emerged from within, wrenching the hole open with incredible force. The entire room began to shake as well as the veil struggled to get against this intrusion. Starlight could only feel the floorboards underneath her creaking in protest, the air turning thick and heavy with a smell comparable to burnt cloth. She gagged as her throat prickled with the overpowering scent of ashes. Vermin were protruding from the hole, rats of color of ink, and their slick bodies leaving trails of red. Starlight could feel them swarming over her body, their tiny claws dragging against her fur. She tried to scream, but all that came out was a series of hacking coughs. "No!" she managed. It was all inside her head. The sensations, the images, the feelings, but it was all real. Ponorbra. The world shook and screamed. The name rumbled louder in Starlight's chest, as if someone had struck the drum. It reverberated across the entire body, her bones vibrating and her eyeballs seeming to shake in their sockets. Though the shrieking cacophony the wind had become, Starlight shouted with incantation. She rattled off the words in desperate determination. But even before the last had fallen from her mouth, she knew the words were nothing. They fell uselessly against the destroyed veil, as light and inconspicuous as moths. Her mind was filling with ancient symbols. These were from a language Starlight didn't study, but however she knew what they meant. A series of seemingly unconnected words and thoughts, an incoherent story told in another language older than any pony kind. Starlight's thoughts began to cave in. Her brain folded like the flimsy thing that had become, spilling secrets and sweet lies into her body, and secrets and sweet lies that lay beyond the average pony's reach, tucked away on the other side of that veil. Acknowledge spells and rituals beyond the capabilities of Princess Celestia herself. Starlight could have them. She could have all of it, but she needed to open her mind a bit wider. Starlight could become a vessel for the forbidden knowledge that lay mere inches from her grasp. But then Starlight saw something else. It was only a glimpse. A split-second image flashed across the rumbling in her brain. Starlight saw the thing that was trying to force its way to the gap she created. She saw the creature that was easing its way inside of her like a memory of a lover. Starlight could feel her horn burning. She was no longer rejecting the squirming sense was drawing from it, holding onto it with an unwavering grip. It struggled, but she had it locked in place. The rumbling quieted ever so slightly as Starlight drained the creature's essence into herself. She could feel it thrashing around, lost within its ingrained assurance, and that it could break from her grasp and continue its steady takeover. But Starlight continued undeterred, expelling every drop of its poison, dropping the power it had gifted her. Starlight was forcing it back. She heard the final quakes of its protest. The world shuddered with its objection, but Starlight didn't pause. The taste of ash was retreating from her throat, her head steadily clearing as she was able to flush the creature's influence from her mind. Starlight could feel the darkness closing around it. She pushed a little harder, forcing the thing back into its true home. The breach had begun to close, her magic rushing to stitch up the rip between the words. Starlight opened her eyes. For a split second she saw a hazy landscape of cliffs and a sky that looked like it was beginning viewed by a dirty lens. But then Starlight blinked and was back in her bedroom. She collapsed right in front of the circle and rolled onto her side. She stared at the side of her bed as if it might give her some kind of answer, but it stared back, as imitated objects as it had been moments before. Moments had only been moments, although it felt like months. Starlight was sure only 5 minutes had paused, and she had been in some kind of between state, her mind trapped in her point of existed within a couple of different passage of time. From her point of view, it had been an hour-long battle. In reality, it had been minutes. "What the fuck am I doing?" Starlight said. She knew what she was doing. She was laying on her side, her eyes burning with impeding sobs. Her body was shaking, her energy completely spent. Even if she'd managed to get her to her hooves, Starlight probably would have collapsed again. She wondered if she could ever move again. She didn't think so. It wasn't that she wanted, which was a silly word, which was a ridiculous title. Starlight wasn't a witch. She was a rebellious teenager playing with the unknown. She could feel the lingering threads of the essence squirming inside of her. Starlight thought that she could have done away with it, but realized that she could never be rid of it. It would have lived inside of her forever. But it was her punishment for messing around with the things that she couldn't hope to understand. A poison, a curse, a reminder of what happened to those who have pushed the boundaries of magic. "I'm poison," she thought. "I'm a curse. That's why I sunburst." Starlight sobbed. She could feel the claws of that thing, that creature, that monster inside her chest. It was still inside her, living, breathing, inactive, but there. Always there forever. She had been greedy. She had always been greedy, Starlight realized. She wanted to become most powerful unicorn of all of Equestria. For herself or her sunburst, it didn't matter. It was like she wanted, and Starlight wouldn't let anyone or anything get in her way. Starlight was afraid of her own greediness, afraid of the images that remained in her head, but mostly she was afraid of herself. She was afraid of the unicorn who was strong enough to defeat the creature of pure darkness. Starlight was afraid that whatever was inside of her, whatever this intense power she spawned within herself, it was going to eat her alive. Sunburst wouldn't want anything to do with her, would he? He wouldn't want her poison or her curse. She didn't even want her poison or her curse. Starlight rolled onto her stomach, her sobs now muffled by the floorboards. She made a promise to herself. Never again. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Ms. Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.